Welcome everyone to Smart Biz Advisors. My name is John Jones. I am your host, and I am joined by my good friend and colleague, Mark Fackrell.
Good morning.
Today, everybody, we are going to focus on mastering business budgeting. So all the strategies for success when creating and maintaining a business budget. So, Mark, you have obviously decades of experience in this area. So, I'd like to start out by asking you about the importance of a business budget. Can you tell us why we need a budget and why it is important?
Absolutely. Thank you for that, John. So, business budgets are important for pretty much every company. I'm going to probably focus a little bit more on the smaller businesses that are starting out, businesses that are not as not a Fortune 500 company. Um, when starting out, businesses, budgeting is probably more important than it is even for a larger company. I mean, everybody needs them in order to manage their expenses and to, make sure that they're managing the business according to a plan, right? And a financial plan is really what it all boils down to, because everybody starts businesses for different reasons, lifestyle, but at the end of the day, it's in order to generate some income, right? And so the importance of a budget is very important, especially when you're starting out. People generally have a limited budget, right? A limited source of funds, and it really kind of helps you to keep track of, where you are as a business, how you're performing according to your plan, and managing the resources that you have so that you can, move on to the next step and generate more and more success. So, and it's interesting too, because budgeting is one of those things that nobody ever wants to talk about it because it's not fun. It requires you sitting down in front of a spreadsheet and playing with numbers, and a lot of people don't like doing that, especially small business owners that they've got something that they're really good at doing, and managing the finances is generally not one of those things. But it takes some discipline, and it's absolutely worth the effort that you put into it.
Yeah, there's a real tendency to think or believe or feel that only experts can do budgets, or that's for somebody who knows what they're doing. But that's not actually true, right, Mark? I mean, that was a great overview. But can you tell us how a business should go about creating a budget?
Absolutely. So I think one of the most important things to do with this is if we kind of change our perspective, because if you talk about a budget for a business, again, a lot of people's eyes, glaze over and roll into the back of their heads, but we all kind of just normally do this in our own personal lives, right? I mean, I know that I'm spending $10 a month on Netflix, and I know that my paycheck is, $2,500, and it comes in on the 1st and the 15th. And so we all kind of know, and we all kind of intuitively do this on our own, to various degrees, right? But if you just kind of think about this the way you would think about your own personal budgeting, and it's just a matter of, I generally know what's coming in and I generally know what's going out. So if you put it down on paper, then what you can do is you can not just generally know, but you can specifically know what's coming in and what's going out, right? So it's just, again, it's a matter of discipline. It's a matter of getting some tools to help you to do it. And then it's a matter of sticking with it. And it's really important because, you and I, John, talked about this the other day. And, I made this analogy of doing it in our personal lives. And while we all do have an idea generally of what's coming in and going out, most people don't, unless they have a specific budget down. They don't know specifically what it is. So it's like, I might be paying $10 for Hulu, and I might be paying $20 for Netflix. But until you put it all down on paper, you don't realize that you add all those things up, and I'm paying $500 a month for all this crap. So.
Yes, yes. And speaking from personal experience, I feel like in this age, it's real easy to get a lot of these subscriptions, which you just mentioned, software as a service is big, right? We've all got them, all kinds of them, both personal and business. In my own experience, I have lost track and was fully intended to cancel subscription, but suddenly opened up my email and discovered that they had charged me, and so I basically lost money. I planned, and it's all because I didn't have that written down. I didn't know when it was coming. So it's easy for us to get in, but it's sometimes hard for us to track our status or our progress. So, with that said, what do you think are some of the most common pitfalls or mistakes or errors or situations that a business can encounter when budgeting or when making a budget?
So that's a really good question. I would say that the number one problem that people encounter when they're doing this is they will go and they'll create their budget at the beginning of the year or whenever, and then they won't use it. So the key to having a budget, the key
So
to
they're doing
making
it,
it
but
healthy,
they're not
but
executing.
exactly. It needs to be a tool that you use on an ongoing basis, right? I would say at the minimum once a month, you should go through and you should update your budget with what you're actually spending, right?
Yeah.
And so then that's when it becomes a useful tool, right? Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's just an exercise where you go and you make a spreadsheet and put a bunch of stuff down, and then next year you would sit and you scratch your head and you wring your hands and say, why didn't I do what I was supposed to do? Well, it's because you weren't using it. It should be a tool that you use on an ongoing basis. It's a feedback loop, right? So I said, I planned on spending, so let's kind of shift focus into the business world away from the personal stuff. But, if I'm, using WordPress and QuickBooks and, all of these different subscriptions, and I've got a budget allocated for, $300 a month for those things.
Yeah.
It's super important when you get to the end of the month, put the number in that you're actually spending. And then you can look at it and say, this is part of the other thing that I've experienced in life is some people look at budgets very rigidly, right? It's like, once the budget is created, I can never deviate from that. And it's like, that's not real, because things change, right? And you'll see something that you realize that it's going to be a benefit to the company. And if you have the rigid view that it's not in my budget, maybe I'll think about doing it next year, you'll never do it. So, go ahead and update your budget and say, I need this other thing that's going to cost me an extra $100 a month, but it's going to provide value. So, modify your budget and then, move forward and say, this is now part of my ongoing expenses.
Yeah. So, those are great points because, you're saying, you're pointing out that it's that we often don't stick with it. We don't make it part of our routine. We're not treating it as an integral part of our business or a tool that we need. So, what do you think is the best way a business can ensure that it sticks with its budget, that it actually uses it and actually adheres to it?
I mean, it really just comes down to discipline, right? You should either, for most of the folks watching this program, they're not going to want to pay somebody else to do this for them.
Right.
That isn't always an option, right? But I mean, that doesn't make sense if you're a small company. So you've just got to be disciplined, right? I mean, and a lot of companies struggle with this, and I personally struggle with it in my own businesses, right? So you've just got to say, I'm going to set aside, the last Friday of every month, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to update my QuickBooks and I'm going to update my budget numbers. And the nice thing about some of the tools that exist out there, is that they can kind of automate this stuff and streamline it, right? So you create your budget in it, and then you can link it with your accounting software, and it'll kind of give you the overview of how you're performing against your budget. And you can update that too. So if you use the right tools, and it'll make your life a lot easier, right? It's like with anything in life, you get out of it what you put into it, right? So a little bit of effort on this. And I think that people really begin to realize the value once they do it, right? I mean, thinking about it is very daunting. It's not something that's fun. It's not something that most people want to do. But once you start using it, I think that people definitely start to realize the value in it, right?
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking, why aren't I doing this? I'm running a bunch of different businesses and my own personal finances, and I definitely keep mental track of what I'm spending, but I have to admit that quite often I'm going over budget, or I'm forgetting that I have this obligation, especially seasonal. For example, your licensing comes up in March, or your renewal is in October. You may forget those things, and so that affects how much money you can spend on your business projects.
Mhm.
So I think, yeah, it's critical. It seems like a really underutilized thing for a business, or even for a person or a business.
It's a really good point. And I mean, I don't know what the statistics are on this. I mean, I think we've probably all heard them. I mean, something like 60 or 70% of new businesses fail, right?
Yeah,
And the reason they fail is because they run out of money. It's not necessarily because they don't have a good idea or they don't operate their business well, but it's a matter of they're not keeping an eye on what they're spending money on, right? So they end up running out of money. And if you do this, then it gives you opportunity to see into the future a little ways, right? I mean, you can't see too far into the future, but it gives you an idea what you're going to spend over the next 3 or 4 months. And if I have an understanding that, my business slows down in June, for example, then I've got to start stockpiling some money in March and April, right? So it allows you to kind of weather those storms. And, the longer you use a budget, I mean, you hit on a really good point. The longer you use a budget and populate it with actual numbers, the better it is, because there are these things that pop up that we all know that we have, insurance, right? But when I'm sitting
yeah,
down doing my
insurance is a big
budget,
one.
I may forget about it, right?
Yeah.
So the longer you use it and the longer you integrate your actual spending with it, then the more beneficial and the more robust it becomes as an actual management tool. And that's really the way people need to think about it. Is it's not, something that you just do and give to your CPA or whatever. It should be a tool that people use to help run their businesses. And I think a lot of businesses would avoid pretty major pitfalls if they would use it and use it routinely, because I mean, there's always unexpected expenses that come up, right? I mean, that's just part of life. And honestly, when you get good at budgeting, you should build some of that in there. But, just the ongoing routine stuff, I mean, that's probably what kills companies more than even a big unexpected expense. And if you're using a budget the right way, then you can plan for those things.
Okay, so let's just get down into a little bit of the nitty gritty.
Mhm.
Like, so, I have QuickBooks, you're a QuickBooks expert.
Mhm.
We're using it in all kinds of different businesses.
Yeah.
Is there a budgeting mechanism in QuickBooks? Can you use QuickBooks effectively as a budgeting tool?
So that's a great question. So QuickBooks does have a budgeting feature. It's not really designed to do that. So, I mean, you can get in there and you can play around with it and you can use it and it will give you reports and it will, it's an effective tool, and it's something that if you've got QuickBooks, you're already paying for it. It's not
Okay.
super user friendly, right?
All right.
So the way let's talk about some of the tools. I mean, one of the most basic budgeting things that people probably use is like an Excel or a Google spreadsheet,
And
right?
yeah, an Excel spreadsheet.
Yep. And so, you can sit down there and build it out, and what I generally do is I put my, incoming revenue at the top, and then I put my expenses down below it, and then across this direction I'll put, it's January, February, March, April, on throughout the year, right? And
Okay.
then you just kind of say, I'm bringing in $10,000 a month and I'm spending, $4,000 a month. And then my net income is going to be 6,000. And I just do that for each month. And I try to do it in a thoughtful manner that actually captures the flow of the business, right? It's a pretty manual process. I mean, it certainly is the cheapest way to do it, right? Because I mean, most of us have Excel, and those of us who don't have Excel, we can use Google Sheets, and that's free, right?
Yeah.
So from it's more work, but it's the cheapest option. The next step up, I suppose, probably would be something like QuickBooks. Again, it's not really designed for a budgeting application. It's got budgeting features in it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're already paying for QuickBooks, it's something that you could play around with and use. And, I would guess I would suggest to most people that if they're going to use something like that, spend a little time talking to, your CPA or somebody like me who does small business finances, and just kind of get some, some training on how to use it and how you can use it to help your business.
Okay.
Because it's not super intuitive. There are programs out there that are designed to do this. It's interesting. Yep. So it's interesting. They've got a lot of programs out there for managing your personal budgets and your personal finances. I think that one of the more popular ones was, I think it was Mint, and they actually just discontinued it the other day, which is kind of unfortunate. But there's not a lot of tools out there that are aimed specifically at small businesses. One that I have used is called Float. And it's pretty intuitive and it's pretty user friendly, and it is specifically designed to do this, and it'll integrate with QuickBooks. So one of the nice things about Float is it'll come in and it'll say, you can use it as, as simply and high level as you want, or you can get super detailed in it, right? So it'll ask you a question. It says, what is your recurring revenue? What are your one-time revenues? And then it'll ask, how much is your phone bill? How much is your insurance? How much is your rent? How much are all of these different things? And then you tell it what these things are, and then it'll forecast it out for, 12 months or 24 months. And then the nice thing about that is it actually integrates with QuickBooks. So this thing where I talked about comparing what you actually spent versus what you were planning on spending, it does it for you automatically, right?
Okay.
And it's got some even better features. So it'll actually save a lot of the legwork, because if you integrate it with QuickBooks, it'll actually look at what you've been spending over the last 3 or 4 months and say, we think that your phone bill is $100. We think that your insurance is $200 a month. So it actually creates the basis of it for you. And then it gives you the opportunity to then go in and modify it and say, okay, well, it's been running $200, but I just added another line to my cell phone. And so now it's going to be, $50 more. So it's super user friendly. It costs, I think it costs like $80 a month if you buy it directly from them. If you buy it from us, we give you a discount. So that's my shameless plug for an opportunity for us to make some money. But it is a really good tool. So
yeah, I look forward to checking it out. I absolutely want to use actively budget. I want to use a budget, especially for my vacation rental property that I'm running.
Yep.
And like I had mentioned to you previously, I have some streaming software, and I see that it replaces Zoom. So I want to make sure that I cancel Zoom before it renews next time. So having a budget would do just that. And I've kicked myself so many times for being overcharged for something just because I didn't keep a proper record.
Well,
So
yep.
that's how important.
So you know what?
is.
That's an awesome point, and I guess I'm gonna throw in a little bit of a cliche, but it is so often true, and it is that we manage what we measure, right? So if we're not paying attention to something, it's easy for it to just, like you said, just slide underneath the cracks. But if we're looking at it, and you're coming up on your renewal, and you just finished your budget, you're going to be like, I gotta cancel Zoom.
Yep. So. But what about businesses that are just starting up, don't have very much historical data? How can they create a budget that is, realistic, that's going to be useful? Do you have any advice for someone just starting out?
It's a matter of research, and it's just a matter of common sense, right? I've got a general idea of what it is that my business is, and I've got a general idea of what it is that it's going to take to make it happen. And you start, you just sit down and you start building your budget. And the interesting thing is it'll help you plan, because, as you putting this down and looking at it, you'll be like, oh, I need this thing too. Right. And then,
yeah, that's a good point.
So it helps you that way. And then again, it's something that just kind of builds upon itself and compounds upon itself. And the more you do it and the more you just keep up with it, then the more robust it becomes as a tool.
Yeah, that's great advice. All right. So before we wrap up, do you have any sort of final tips or any pieces of advice for our listeners who are, looking to improve their budgeting skills?
I mean, again, it's really just a matter of discipline, and a lot of it is just common sense, and it's things that we do when we balance our checkbook, right? I mean, just take the application that you use in your personal life and you apply it to your business, and the key is just stick with it. It's easy to forget about it, and it's easy to say, it's not that important, but just be disciplined. I mean, that's really what it boils down to, and you'll see, you will absolutely, I will guarantee you, every person that watches this, if they do it for a year, they will not ever stop doing it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, after all, it's your money.
Right.
And so what's more important? It's really kind of surprising, almost shocking that more people don't use budgeting actively. So yeah, I think that using this kind of platform to emphasize its importance is really important and valuable. You know,
Absolutely.
so I just want to thank everyone today for joining us and listening to our discussion. That's all for today's episode of Smart Biz Advisors. Please, everybody, tune in next time for more tips, tricks, advice, and discussion about all the topics that are facing small businesses in America today.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care, guys.